And one more time, we're joined by WBZ's Kristina Rex at the courthouse in Dedham. This has been a wild turn of events, Kristina. So the judge declared a mistrial yesterday.
Yeah, so no verdict, no real ending to this case for anybody involved. It was a hung jury since Friday midday. They came back deadlocked a second time late Monday morning, and then again at the end of the day, or not even end of the day, Monday afternoon. Came back deadlocked for a third time, even after being read what's called a dynamite charge. So a charge that's really supposed to encourage them to come to a verdict, and it didn't work. They were stuck.
Right. And it's interesting, you had that sense of how people reacted inside the courtroom, which I don't even think can come across on streaming or on TV, really. So as each jury question happened, and they would come back in and tell the judge, we can't come to a decision. Was there a sense of growing frustration, or was it just quiet stillness?
I think growing anxiety. I mean, I think that just the stress level is elevated. You saw a shift. You saw a shift. I mean, when we spoke, you saw every single day outside of court. I would walk out of court and speak on camera with Karen Reed and her attorneys. And they were supremely confident and jubilant at times. And then as the jury was deliberating and it wasn't coming together, they started taking another route so that we couldn't interview them anymore.
They started coming in the courtroom a different way.
Yeah.
For the first time, avoiding all the supporters even.
Yes. They shied away from cameras. They shied away from supporters. And that, I think that was really indicative of just the way the stress was mounting.
Right. I saw John O'Keefe's mother crying, dabbing her eyes, looking really sad. What was the sense from the family as time went on?
So the O'Keefes did not spend their time near the courthouse. They had a private location away, and they would be called back here only for the beginning and end of the day. They didn't come for all the jury questions. But that sense in the courtroom when that mistrial was declared, it was heavy. Like you felt, you like heard a sigh in the courtroom as that happened.
These people, it's been more than 2 years, and they're just waiting for an answer, right? They're waiting for some finality.
Right.
Anybody who has lost a loved one, but certainly in a violent way, can understand why there's such a need for that. It's got to be
right. There's a level of closure that everybody involved in this case is looking for, and I think any verdict could have provided some version of closure, and yet the ultimate result of mistrial is the only thing that leaves this case wide open.
Sure. And we talked to a juror last night who said this was an alternate, so they were not involved in the deliberations, but sat there during the entire trial. They would have voted not guilty. So clearly, deeply divided was the phrase the foreperson used. These people could tell they were never going to come to agreement, and kind of represented the two sides that had gathered outside the courthouse.
Oh, absolutely. And just in discussions publicly. I mean, everybody's been following this case, right?
Yeah.
I think we speak to legal analyst Jennifer Roman all the time. And she said last week, you can go to a dinner party with 10 friends and everyone will have a different opinion on this case. And you can't get anybody to change their minds. It's just really polarizing.
It's true. I just happened to be at a hairdresser the other day, and I could hear a man and a woman debating back and forth about the details of the case. And people were so knowledgeable about really minute detail in this case. They were immersed in it. And I also happened to speak to a defense attorney over the weekend who is very experienced, who said two things which I thought were interesting. We kind of take it for granted now, but this man said that the judge had done a very good job when you consider the chaos surrounding the case and certainly the public displays going on outside. Looking back now, she maintained control over the courtroom and really did maintain a sense of control and order through this whole 10-week process. That was number one. And the second thing he pointed out is that the prosecution, I know as you reported, has said, they're going to retry the case, but this person used the word nightmare in describing trying to retry this case. What are you hearing from people in and around the case there?
I mean, I think that there is a real compulsion to retry this case, right?
There's a dead Boston police officer.
Yeah, that's the floor, right? That's the minimum reason. Then there's the momentum around the case. There's the public outcry around the case.
Mhm.
There's the way that a judge and a prosecutor and a DA have been called out by defense attorneys for allegedly being corrupt. I
Yeah.
mean, there's been reputations put on the line. The case has exposed some really troubling behavior in state police. And
Oh.
I just think all of that pressure mounts for a need for some kind of ending.
Yeah.
And a mistrial is not the ending.
There are so many layers to this, as you say, when you zoom in on the community in Canton. I mean, you know, really devastating personal relationships have been put on the line and put on full view here, surrounding all of the families, all of the witnesses involved. And then going out, the state police, all of the police officers involved in this case. And we should say, before we recorded this, late last night, state police announced that the lead investigator has been relieved of duties. So explain how enormous that is and what that means.
Yeah, so this Trooper Michael Proctor, who's the lead investigator on this case, he was also the man who testified to lewd and inappropriate personal text messages he sent about Karen Reed to friends, to coworkers, to supervisors. He admitted to essentially searching for nude photos on her personal cell phone throughout the course of the investigation. So it was really
her medical condition.
Yep.
Some of those. It was very unprofessional behavior.
Totally. And it was so interesting, just hours after the mistrial came down, he was relieved of his duties. And that was clearly intentional timing. I mean, over the course of this trial, every time I've reached out to the state police or the state police union, the response about his job status has basically been, you know, there's an open internal affairs investigation.
Yeah.
That's it. He wasn't on leave. He testified that he was still the lead investigator on this case on paper. And even the union had said, we're refraining from comment until there's a verdict. So it really did feel like something would change as soon as the trial was over.
Yes.
And clearly that happened in the form of relieving him of his duties, which basically means that he's still a trooper in name, but he can't practice his job right now. Like he can't go be a trooper right now.
Even the governor had weighed in how disgusted she was by the tone and tenor of those text messages. I mean, it really does, even if you consider the, you know, disappointment of seeing a lack of professionalism there, and some ethical issues, it doesn't seem to indicate someone who's thinking about the fact that they are the lead investigator, and one would imagine that person knows as a public employee, anything that they text would become a matter of record, and to not have self-awareness about that indicates like a stunning just lack of self-awareness.
Right. And it is, I mean, it was explained to me multiple times that it is very unusual for an investigator's personal cell phone to become part of the public record. These were not text on his work phone, but it's always possible.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're taught, don't text.
No, and certainly
If you-
text anything you don't read out loud at a deposition.
Right.
Or in
right.
open court, which is exactly what happened in the end.
Right. Yep.
Interesting. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about what's next. I mean, this is a case that captured the imagination of people around the country who flew in to stand outside that courthouse in Dedham. So we'll be right back with WBZ's Kristina Rex. Thanks for sticking with us. We're talking to WBZ reporter Kristina Rex, who has been inside the courtroom for every second of the Karen Reed murder trial, which ended in a mistrial yesterday. And so many questions remain. What's the first thing you want to know, Kristina?
The first thing I want to know is, how would the second trial look compared to the first? I mean, think about the state's case, 68 witnesses, nearly 8 weeks just for the state alone. It has to be different the second time around, right? I mean, the timing of this case was such a huge challenge for finding a jury. You just wonder if the state's case is going to be more focused, more pared down, kind of focused on the minute details, because there was a lot of extra information over the course of that long case. And you just have to wonder how they'll change it and if there'll be different charges filed.
Whether it's right or not. Yeah, a lot of people, the word that was thrown around about this case is that she was overcharged.
With second degree murder.
Yeah, if they're going to lower those charges, would that be unprecedented or?
No, I don't think so. Based on legal analysts I've spoken to, they almost expect that. You know, you're getting a second chance.
Manslaughter and
right.
Else.
You're getting a second chance at this trial and you're going to fine tune everything.
Right, which gives the Commonwealth an enormous advantage, right? If they get to kind of
Yes.
decide the parameters of what the case is going to be.
On the flip side to that, historically, second trials are bad for the prosecution because evidence only gets worse over time.
Exactly.
Evidence does not improve. And
older.
so it's
Memories
great. It's
are
older,
older.
memories fade.
Right.
Exactly.
There also, you've got to consider, would probably need to be a change of venue.
And I'm sure that'll be considered. Also, not to mention, it took over 400 jury interviews to find 17 jurors in this case, in this county. Imagine doing that again. I imagine it would be doubled.
So you wonder if they might move the case to a court in Western Mass, for instance, somewhere really, really far away. What about for Karen Reed? This was an enormously expensive defense that she mounted. Clearly, it partially paid off, ending in a mistrial. It's not what she wanted, but she wasn't found guilty.
Right.
The question is, would all of these Karen Reed supporters, pre-Karen Reed movement, they might raise a lot of money for her.
And I've already seen rumblings on social media that they'll start fundraising again. And I tried to ask her lawyer, Alan Jackson, a question right after the verdict when he came down and he made a brief statement. I kind of yelled out because they were up on the stairs. You know, Alan, do you plan on staying on as Karen's attorney? And he didn't answer, but I think his statement was indicative that he does. He said, you know, we have no quit. We'll be here. And so it certainly seems like the team on Karen Reed's side will stay together, but that's not cheap. These are high-powered, very expensive attorneys. Yeah.
Lally, who was the prosecutor here, would he keep the case or would it maybe go to somebody else? I'm just not sure how that works.
I think it could go either way. I think presumptively he would keep the case and he would try it again, unless for some reason he doesn't want to, or the Norfolk County DA makes a change.
Yeah. You know, for your part, a couple of things, you know, for so much that was so bad about this case, as you pointed out, the fact that so many of the members of law enforcement displayed really disappointing behavior surrounding this case. One thing that made me feel good about it was, as with most juries that we see, you realize once people are in that jury box, they take their job very, very seriously.
Incredibly.
And it shows the high burden of proof in our system.
Totally. I mean,
feel good about the system.
Yeah, the jurors, they were so serious. They took their jobs so seriously. I mean, even reading, did you hear when the judge read those jury notes?
Yes.
You can tell they crafted those jury notes. You know what I mean?
Even she said, I've never read a jury note like this.
Yes, like if I colloquially were a juror and I was trying to tell the judge we can't come to an agreement, my note would be chicken scratch and it would say, we can't agree with each other. Their notes were so eloquent. They clearly took their jobs very professionally in this case. They were very, very good about behaving, for lack of a better term, in the courtroom. And I think a lawyer I spoke to said this, and I agree that for better or for worse, a lot of the silver lining that came out of this is that the community is paying attention to how the system works.
Yes.
People are following a trial for the first time. They're learning how the court system works for the first time, and more education is better for everyone.
It's true. And, you know, I've got to say, for our part, as members of the media, part of that education for the public, I think, has been, you know, so many times on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it now, or Instagram, someone would respond to me when I would repost one of your updates or what have you. And they would write things like, well, where have you been, WBZ? Or, you know, we've been following this case for 2 years. And I think members of the public are truly realizing, well, right, we cover what's happening in the court case as it went along.
Right.
There is a difference between what journalists do on the record and what people online can just throw out there.
Can just chat about whether it's true or not.
Exactly. So talk a little bit about how citizen journalists played a role in this case.
I mean, you saw even yesterday being the day that a mistrial was declared, posts on X immediately, accounts tweeting, I heard it was 11-1 split, 11 not guilty, 1 guilty, and they just couldn't convince that final person. I heard 10-2 split, blah, blah, blah. I heard there's a plant on the jury. I heard there's a former police officer on the jury. None of that, if any of that is true, we don't know it. Nobody knows
No
what the
one knows.
juror split is.
The only thing
Nobody
we
knows.
know, the only thing we know is that the foreperson wrote that they were deeply divided.
Right, which
would
implies
indicate
more than one
more
person.
than one person.
Yes, and so, but the way that those posts online immediately take off, immediately.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people comment on my videos. I heard the foreperson is a former cop. Like, obviously this is rigged. I'm like, that is probably not true, and we don't know that.
Yeah, my sister's cousin's hairdresser's best friend
Literally
said that they
told
know
me.
someone who's on the, yeah, it just, and so you realize that what our system attempts to do is stop the game of telephone, right?
Yes.
And things have to be on the record in court under oath.
Yep.
And for our part, we're not going to report anything until we have sources, confirmation. We know everything is true. So, you know, whether it was us, whether it was the Globe or one of the other TV stations in Boston, we might not have been talking about a lot of the theories or ideas people were talking about surrounding this case a long time ago, because that's not our job, not our role, and it's our responsibility not to do that.
No, 100%. And I mean, look at the defense's narrative here, right? The defense crafted an entire, I don't want to say crafted, but they, you know, their story arc of what they told jurors happened was the complete opposite of what the prosecution said happened. A completely different version of events. And that is not something that is a journalist's job. It is not my job to go and say, well, if Karen Read didn't do this, let me point the finger at this person. Maybe they did. That's not our job. That's speculation.
Exactly.
And that's I mean, that's lacking credibility for us. A defense attorney's job is to fearlessly and fiercely defend their client, whatever it takes.
Right.
We're not advocates.
Right, exactly. We're not advocates for one side or the other.
Right.
And the defense might have theorized about other people might have done this. But if you notice, even it was not incumbent upon them to prove their theory.
No,
they could just say it, and it was
Right.
on the prosecution to prove exactly what they thought happened to John O'Keefe. And obviously there was such deep division on that jury. The jury could not convict, could not find guilty. So let me give you just a minute to give your final thoughts before, as we wrap up this phase of Karen Read's trial, because we know it will loom again. But as for the last 10 weeks, what do you think? What do you say?
You know, I have tried not to reflect personally too much in our talks, but this is disappointing. I've gotten to know the people who work at this courthouse, the court officers, the families, the lawyers, the clerks. It's been so much work and so many long days and grueling and painful and emotional testimony for, at the end of the day, just to be back to square one, which is too bad.
It's true. It is too bad. Well, for our part, Kristina, you have done a tremendous job.
Thank you.
Getting everybody, being in the courtroom every single day, reporting on every minute, and along with getting your law degree, very insightful about a lot of the legal proceedings. So it was perfect timing for you.
It was.
Your education as a law student. So WBZ's Kristina Rex, outstanding work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Paula.
See you soon.
Bye.